My guest today is Michael L. Taylor, and he is the founder of Vitamin One and a former U.S. Special Forces Green Beret, an international security expert, and internationally known for orchestrating what is said to be the greatest escape in modern history of Carlos Ghosn, the former CEO of Nissan and Renault, from Japan in December of 2019. Now, Michael has a long career in elite military service, including experience in counterterrorism, covert operations, and high-risk extractions, which honed his skills in tactical planning and in unconventional problem solving. But after leaving the military, Michael transitioned into private security, specializing in risk management and international security consulting. Now, he was hired by Carlos Ghosn's associates to execute the complex plan that involved smuggling the high-profile executive out of Japan, where he was awaiting trial on charges of alleged corporate misconduct. The operation saw Ghosn concealed inside a musical instrument case and flown from Japan to Lebanon, a country without an extradition treaty with Japan. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome one of the most extraordinary individuals I have ever had on my show, successful entrepreneur and international security expert, the one and the only Michael L. Taylor, to the show. Well, welcome, Michael. Well, it's great to have you on. And I have to ask, first off, tell me about your military career.
Well, I went in, I turned down some football scholarships because I heard that Special Forces was going to allow some people right from high school with no military experience to try out. And I only found that out because my father was a career soldier. And living on a base where there was a Special Forces unit, which was only two in the United States at the time, I was able to find out because working out in the gym with these guys with the long hair and were pretty cool guys. I found out through them. So I turned down going to college and tried out for the U.S. Special Forces, and and luck so be it, I made it through.
Well, what type of training does it take to become a Green Beret?
You know, that's a good question. It takes a lot of grit. You've got to be coachable. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be mentally incredibly strong and physically incredibly strong. One good thing about it, no matter what they test you on, they're going to teach you beforehand. So going back to that old saying, stay alert, stay alive. Well, pay attention to what they're teaching and you'll do just fine.
So, what type of mindset do you have to have being an elite soldier, and how did that training translate to success in civilian life?
You learn an awful lot in the military, especially the more elite units. And a lot of it comes down to dedication, desire, motivation. And it comes from within. It's not something that somebody is going to encourage you to do. Because at those levels, there's nobody encouraging you walking through the wait a minute vines of North Carolina swamps in the cold, looking for a little engineer stake in the middle of nowhere to pass your land navigation course. Nobody's going to be there. Come on, you can do this. You can do this. You're on your own. And that's what they want. They want people who on their own can do things. But, as a team, you just compounded your capabilities by 11.
So, what's the difference between a Green Beret and, let's say, a Navy SEAL?
I think the Navy SEALs, they have a different mission. Technically, they don't do the unconventional warfare mission. I think both units do direct action and the strategic reconnaissance and so on and so forth, and the basic stuff that you see in the Hollywood films. But I think one thing that separates us is we do the unconventional warfare. So we go in and train guerrillas and train resistance units and forces in the local population to fight against their occupier.
Wow. I mean, when you left the military, how did you become an international security expert?
Well, it just started out that you have contacts in different countries that you worked in, and they find out that you get out and you end up doing work because they have security concerns. And then some of it is also in defense contracting business. When some of the wars came up, you convert over to a defense contractor and you're using former military guys for it, which You know their background, you know their training, you don't have any real HR problems with it. So that way you're able to comply with what's required and get the mission done.
So, what's the difference between being a security expert and when we see the movies, what's the difference between being a mercenary?
Mercenary, I think, does it solely for money. I don't think you can call defense contractors mercenaries because they're doing it for a cause. Yeah, everybody gets paid, but so does a soldier. So does a president. So is a president a mercenary? Um, so I think that the days of the mercenaries were in the 70s and early 80s when you see them in Rhodesia and places like that going to fight, and they have no idea what they're fighting about, just getting paid.
Yeah, I know that story. Now, you were described as the key player and critical link in one of the most important federal law enforcement operations in history. What was that operation?
That was an undercover operation that took a little over 4 years, and that was to penetrate an international organization that was based in the northeast of the United States and went all the way over to the Middle East. And what they had done is ultimately ship $100 million worth of hash from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon to Boston in the United States. In addition to that, several of the attorneys were involved with money laundering and so on and so forth. But it resulted in keeping $100 million of illegal drugs off the streets.
So, what's the difference between working with the military, let's say the Pentagon, versus federal law enforcement? I guess what is that, the FBI and the CIA?
Yeah, it was a combination of a bunch of different ones. They call it an OCDF case, Organized Drug Task Force. So you have everybody and their brother involved in it. And there they have different rules. It's a different mindset. I had never done anything like that before. And it was really interesting because they came to me as a favor. Can you penetrate this organization that speak Arabic and travel over there, so on and so forth, which I was able to do. In the military, it's more comforting for me because that's where I grew up. We know what we've got to do. You're kicking doors. You know why you're kicking doors. You're training people to kick doors and fight for the country. You know what that's all about. In law enforcement, there's so many laws, so many regulations, and it's just it's really complicated.
Well, yeah, I guess it would be because I guess it wouldn't matter if it's federal law, state law, local law. When it comes to law enforcement, the whole point is you're trying to find, I guess, the bad guy or the perpetrator, but you got to make sure that when they go to court, nobody made a misstep so that way the charges stick. Is that the best way to explain it?
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many different rules there than in a military environment or a combat environment. There's rules on getting warrants to listen to people's telephone calls, their cell phones, different warrants for black bag operation where they're actually putting bugs in their homes, their offices, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's interesting. And my part was to do the undercover, and obviously nothing involved with that stuff. That's for the prosecutors and the real federal agents to deal with. So I just sat back and watched that part. Everybody has a part, and it was a team effort. So which is why it worked.
Well, you were also instrumental in training Afghanistan soldiers. Is that correct? And that was to fight what, against the Taliban?
Yeah, we had the responsibility to train the Afghan commandos in conjunction with working with U.S. Special Forces. So that's what that was. And yeah, that was to fight the Taliban, which ultimately, was all for naught since it was all given back to them plus, plus, plus.
Yeah.
And
Were you
the unfortunate thing is, if the Taliban had taken it over and they were going to, change their ways and let women get educated and have medicine there, so on and so forth, but they didn't. They went back to what they were, what we knew they were.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories, and of course, you would know firsthand that training these soldiers ended up being a full blown waste of time.
Yeah, but you know what? We could say that for a whole bunch of different countries we were involved in training people. You can go back to Lebanon during the early 80s. Was that a waste of time? Well, Hezbollah has taken over most of Lebanon until recently. Um, so yeah, training the army was a waste of time.
Yeah, that I can't even imagine, working in that sector and have to deal with so much. And, even before the great escape of Carlos Ghosn, um, were some of your missions in the public sector equal to things that maybe we saw on Jack Ryan or Ethan Hawke in Mission Impossible?
I can't say for sure, only because, and I'm not being coy, only because I've never watched those shows. I couldn't tell you what they're about. So it's kind of, I'm a bit ignorant in that regard to answering it. But is it something, some of the missions that you would see in a Hollywood movie or something? Absolutely. Except these are real.
Yeah, exactly. I watch things like the night agent, the diplomat, the agency, the list goes on. And I always wonder, do they have FBI? Do they have CIA, former CIA consultants to get the storylines as close to real as possible? So some of the things that they do, I'm always kind of wondered, they probably do that in real life. So to try to keep it as authentic as possible. And I understood that you had a company called American International Security Corp, which employed as many as 2,000 people. What were some of the things that you did that you could actually talk about?
Well, a lot of it was providing security for like the Department of Justice over in Iraq during the war. The Department of Justice had a division called the Regime Crimes Liaison Office, and their responsibility in Lebanon was to prosecute Saddam Hussein and his administration for war crimes they had committed and crimes before, such as mass casualties. He would gas the Kurdish people, for example, collect the bodies and put them in a mass grave and bury them. He did that to Sunnis, he did it to Shiites, he did it to several other Iraqis. So it wasn't anything new. And there were mass graves all over Iraq. So one of our jobs was to protect the scientists, the prosecutors, investigators who were going to these locations to dig up the bodies for the forensic evidence for the use in court to prosecute Saddam and his administration. So that was one of the things that really tugged at our hearts because you'd see in the mass graves little tiny bones and a tiny little shirt that you knew was for a child. So that stuff, it's not fun. It's not fun.
Yeah, I have an upcoming interview on the International Criminal Court at The Hague, and that's actually one of the topics for the interview. So it's interesting to have you say all of that, to know that we have never-ending wars. Um, One of the things that I learned that many of these wars today, or I should say for many many decades in the past, have been described as preemptive war, creating your neighbor as an enemy, and it just goes on and on. And I mean, what for you? What is your or even do you have an opinion on what's been going on between Israel and Hamas, as well as Russia and the Ukraine?
Yeah, well, look with regard to Israel and Hamas and Israel and Hezbollah, Israel and the Houthis, they're fighting them all at once. And frankly, the new superpower in the Middle East is Israel. They've changed the map of everything that's happening in the Middle East. Iran has historically, since 1982, since Ayatollah Khomeini came back into power, used these proxies to do their bad business. Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they've all been attacking us and the Westerners since 1983. So you can go back to the days of April 18th, 1983, when they blew up the American embassy in Beirut. October 23rd, 1983, the Marine barracks and the French barracks also. And it goes on and on and on. Then all the hostages, so on and so forth. And again, that's Iran doing that. Iran was funding it. So it's good to see that. I'm sure Trump will cut that funding off like he did before because Iran is vulnerable now. They can say what they want, but the Israelis have eliminated their air defense. They've eliminated their proxy Hezbollah for the most part. They've eliminated Hamas for the most part, and the Houthis are next up on deck. They're not as a threat as Hamas was or Hezbollah because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the funding that they had. Now, cut the funding on Iran, they're vulnerable. They don't have the air defenses. Now might be an opportune time to get them off the map.
Wow. I mean, it's a war's complicated, isn't it?
You know, it's not the wars that are complicated. It's the people that make the mess that forces the war that are complicated. Because if you have a regime change in Iran and they want to sell their oil and do business with the world and be good neighbors, it's going to be a whole different story. That's not what they've been about since Ayatollah Khomeini came back in.
Yeah, I remember when the Shah of Iran was overthrown in 1979. Many people don't realize that Iran was actually a great metropolitan country, as if you went to New York or if you went to Paris or Santiago, Chile. You know, it was a beautiful place to live. And I speak to many Iranians who wish for the day that those days would come back and be a democracy again.
We
And
wish it. We wish it too. How many people have we lost? How many lives have we lost because of them? You know, they thought fighting Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years was great, gave them, you know, a standing in the world. It was a joke. It was terrible. It was a waste of human life because it's two weak armies battling against each other for what? You know, it was just a shame. What are they going to split up Quiche Island or something? Come on, guys. But
yeah,
anyways, now they're vulnerable for once because their proxies can't do their bidding for them. So I'm sure there's some thought going on to maybe we can neutralize them once and for all because the people of Iran don't want this. They don't want war. They want to be able to live. They want to be able to buy a pair of jeans. They want to be able to watch MTV. You know, they want to do everything that we do as human beings. They want to feed their families. They want to have work. They want to have economy and commerce going. No different than we are.
oh, absolutely. I mean, I've talked to people who were born and raised and escaped Afghanistan, and now, you know, there's a humanitarian crisis going on because all of the women, all of their education has been taken away, all of it. Uh, they have to wear, you know, covering from head to toe. They can literally not be seen. It's almost like the Taliban is treating women as if they were absolutely invisible. And it's worse now than it's ever been.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not going to change anytime soon.
No, it's not. And I understand too that in 1993, when the World Trade Center was bombed, um, they made a phone call to you, didn't they?
Yeah, well, what happened was another company, security company, got the actual contract to do the vulnerability assessment for the entire port of New York and New Jersey. That's a pretty big project, and they really didn't know how to do it. They were trying to calculate what the risk is and how to mitigate the risk. And you know, I come in with a wad of chewing tobacco, my Timberlands jeans, and a T-shirt with all these spooks and highfalutin federal agents. And wait a minute, guys, let's pretend that we have all the intelligence in the world, which we do, and alliances with so many other countries. We can't tell you that on February 1993 that somebody's going to put a car bomb in the World Trade Center in New York and try to blow it up. So what makes you think that you're going to try to figure out the risk of that right now? Not going to happen. So let's be a little more practical. Let's pretend we're the terrorists. How are we going to hurt you, kill a lot of your people, or undermine the confidence that the public has in you? Just like a terrorist would. And then let's turn it around and mitigate that. So that's what we did. So every facility they had, the George Washington Bridge, the tunnel, the pass system, the airports, the World Trade Center complex, the Port Authority facilities, the communication facilities. that send, super, super important information for Wall Street all over the world, every second of the day. How are we going to mess that up and cause a lot of havoc? And let's turn it around. How do we prevent that from happening? So that's what we did.
When after 9/11 happened, I heard that there was a meeting where many of the Hollywood CEOs were called together, and other people in that industry, in the film industry, to create as big of outlandish ideas of what type of attacks could be done to America after 9/11. Literally allowed them to let their imagination run wild so they would kind of look at what type of assessments they were going to have to do in the future to prevent some of these things from happening. And I get, of course, this. I mean, like you said, the drug bust took 4 years to implement, and terrorists have no problem waiting 10 years to implement one of their attacks.
Back to I told them at the time, and it's in writing, that the only thing we can't protect you against is aircraft flying into your building. And at the time, everybody thought, nah, that ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen. Well, guys, there's nothing new. The Japanese were doing as kamikaze pilots back in World War II. So don't think it's new. And don't think, car bombs aren't coming, which I said a few years before when we were doing the vulnerability assessment for Airbus Industries facility down in Virginia. And then sure enough, a few years later, this happens. And it was actually Bill O'Reilly, when he was on Fox News, asked me about that report. He says, is it true that you had said the only thing we can't protect you against is planes crashing into your buildings? Apparently he had the draft report, which is true. And again, we couldn't control that because we didn't control the screeners at the airports. TSA hadn't existed at that time.
Yeah, and I think back, and besides the bombing at the World Trade Center, it was the bombing at the Murrah building in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that was internal though. That wasn't
Yeah,
foreigners.
right.
That was a wannabe Rambo that did that and killed a lot of innocent people.
Well, for someone like you, how does one find someone like you to implement a rescue or a top secret mission? And I can understand if you can't answer that question.
It's not that I can't answer it. I think it's just word of mouth. It's not like, you're in the old yellow pages, or anything like that. It's, um, when here, let me give you a little bit of specifics on it. I found out that I got the call from Carlos Ghosn's people is because two couples were having dinner, and one of the ladies that was having at that dinner said, "Well, if my husband was ever," apparently they were talking about Carlos, and said, "Well, if my husband was ever, grabbed like that or being tortured, guy I would call would be Mike Taylor." The other couple said, "Whoa, I've heard of him. He helped me in Iraq."
Wow,
And he
what a
said,
crazy coincidence
"A
for
small
that.
world."
Yeah, I mean, now I watched all 4 episodes of the documentary on Apple TV Plus about the whole Carlos Ghosn situation with him being CEO of Nissan, well, of actually started out as at Renault, eventually wanting to be a dual CEO of both Renault and Nissan. And I think his career spanned was somewhere like 20 years. And then the big surprise arrest, because I saw it on the news. I'm like, wow, what is going on here? Because even now, Nissan is in big financial trouble. And for you, though, was getting Carlos Ghosn out of Japan easier than you thought it would be?
Yes, in a word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
because you explained it in the documentary on how it all went down, and I was surprised that
yeah.
how easy, somewhat easy that it was.
Well, a great operation and a great plan makes it look easy. So that's the fact. Great preparation means you're probably you'd be successful. When you don't prepare properly and you run into Murphy's Law, you're probably not going to succeed. So the planning of it was meticulous and it was perfect because the operation was perfect. And there were contingencies built into it, like you would any type of military operation. And thankfully, we didn't need that many of them, but it worked. This is the bottom line. And again, it looks easy because the plan worked, because it was well prepared. But it's not easy if you think about it just from the surface. How am I going to get one of the most popular faces out of this country? Carlos was incredibly popular. He couldn't walk down the street on a dark night in an alley without somebody saying, "Hi, how are you?" Because they know him. That's how popular he is. But again, a natural camouflage is often the best camouflage. And back then, even before COVID came out, it was normal for Japanese to wear masks, the surgical masks. So let's fit in with natural camouflage. That's one of the things we use to our benefit.
Yeah, I was really surprised because I love the documentary. It was extremely well done. Um, it's a very, I would say it's a very unbiased documentary. It's not leaning one way or another. It allows the audience to make their own judgment. I was surprised that with Carlos, he said that all I have to do is make a phone call about the press, and then the authorities that were sitting outside in a van watching his residence would drive off knowing that the press was coming. And that was really an instrumental part of that whole plan, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Everybody thinks in general that Japan is, very nice people, very humble, which they are. But their government and how they deal with issues, absolutely not. It's World War II, pre-World War II mentality. From how they prosecute people, what do they have? I think it's a 99.4% conviction rate if you go to trial. The whole system is geared up, so you're going to lose no matter what. As soon as they arrest you, you're going to the jail, you're going into solitary confinement, and you're going to stay there more than likely until you're convicted. And you're going to stay there longer, and they'll drag that trial out as long as possible until they get a conviction or a confession. And one of the real main issues is it takes about 3 to 3.5 years before you can get to a trial. So you're going to sit in jail, in solitary confinement for 3.5 years before you can get to a trial. Yep. So going back to the planning, here's the most popular guy, in Japan, and the most notorious face next to Shinzo Abe, the prime minister at the time. How are you going to get him out? So that was an issue. So we've got to use what we have available to us, such as they don't have security checks on the way out, only the way in. They saw a guitar case without a guitar in it, and they thought we were musicians. Just the optics of it. And I heard somebody, saying to somebody else later, "Oh yeah, I talked to Mr. Taylor and he said he was a musician." Never talked to anybody. Didn't say a word other than hello, how are you? So let alone about I'm a musician. That was the first. But yeah, and again, it goes back to if you plan it properly, it'll work. And I thought James Jones did an incredibly good job of producing that documentary. I don't always agree with everything. Nobody's gonna agree to every documentary, all the facts in it, but all the things that are presented in it. But one of the things that really struck me, really in a negative way, was one of the conditions that Carlos Ghosn had on bail was that he could not talk to his wife, couldn't talk to her on the telephone, and couldn't see her in person. He's got a $13.2 million bail he's got to put up, and he's not allowed to speak to his wife. He couldn't even have a press conference. He wanted to have a press conference afterwards, and the Minister of Justice, I believe it was, or the prosecutor said, Well, he can have all the press conferences he wants, and we can bring all the new charges we want.
Wow. I maybe
That
get,
sounds
yeah.
like Yeah, that sounds like some, kangaroo justice somewhere, banana republic justice.
Yeah,
And
in a
this isn't
modernized,
this isn't a civilized country.
that's what I was going about to say. A modernized country has the thought process because I have read, I have interviewed people when it comes to uh, prison camps in Japan in World War II, and and it sounds like to like you said, and according to the documentary and what you and your son lived through, you experienced that.
Yeah, my son and I both did. First of all, we should have never been, extradited. That's number one. There's still professors of criminal law at the most prestigious universities in Japan. The former special prosecutor of Tokyo says what we did was not a violation of law, and it's never been prosecuted before. Clearly, they were humiliated by Carlos leaving. So they wanted to get back. The Japanese government throws a lot of money around to American politicians, foreign politicians, and they spend somewhere about 138 million to 150 million a year on lobbyists inside the Beltway in Washington. So the Japanese get what they want. When the Japanese talk, they get it because they have a lot of money behind them. And don't think for a second that American politicians aren't getting some of that money. That's my belief.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anybody to say that doesn't happen.
The thing that surprised me though, because it's in the documentary about you really didn't expect that you and your son were going to be extradited to Japan, and with all of the work that you did for the Pentagon, for the FBI, and the CIA, and technically all linked to many of it to the benefit and the safety of the United States, they stabbed you in the back.
Yeah, but you know what? It shouldn't be about, oh, I've done all this stuff for our country, so I shouldn't get treated negatively. It should be any American citizen should not get treated that way. It doesn't matter if you're, whatever your job, if you're a school teacher, you're a gym teacher, you work in a lab somewhere. No American should be treated like that way, knowingly sent extradited overseas to get tortured, because that's what happened. And the reality is, if you really want to do that because Japanese have influence, why not just send me? Why send my son? My son had nothing to do with it, and that's well known. It's well established. But again, why do we knowingly send people over there, knowing we're going to get tortured? Your American citizen is going to be tortured. It was 6 or 8 months ago that there were three British citizens that were charged with robbing a jewelry store over in Japan for some $700,000, beat up a Japanese citizen, and escaped. Japan, although they don't have an extradition treaty with the UK, requested their extradition. It went to court, and the judge in the UK said, no, we're not, because your history of torturing people. So we will not extradite them. Interesting. But our judge here in Boston asked the State Department for, it was Pompeo's State Department at the time, for a sworn affidavit saying we won't be tortured. And the language was, it's more likely than not that they will not be tortured. But you can go on their website and check the torture. There's no heat, people get frostbite, there's no communication, so on and so forth. It's all on the State Department's website.
Now, is that why you decided, which I thought was a smart move when I watched the documentary, that you and your son pleaded guilty immediately? Because you already
Yeah.
knew why be in solitary confinement for 3.5 years before your trial starts. Confess to it, get it done, and hopefully the sentence isn't going to be that long. But so your sentence was what, 2 years, and your son was what, 17, 18 months?
My sentence for the Japanese was 24 months. His was 20 months. Yeah, we had no option but to, you know, plead guilty, because I don't want to wait 3.5 years to go to a trial that you're going to lose anyway.
How did your name get leaked for them to know that it was you that did it?
Word leaked out from Lebanon. It was inadvertent, leaked out that I'm the guy that ran the operation and conducted it. So that's what happened. And of course, that hit the media, and the media went in a frenzy because that was a worldwide media event. Not so much in the United States, apparently, as it was over in the Far East and the Middle East. That was much bigger over there. But yeah, going back to the judicial system, we spent 10 months in an American jail waiting, fighting the extradition. And prior to the operation, I had checked with several international lawyers who also said what we're doing is not a violation of crime, because most people don't realize in Japan, bail jumping is not a crime. Bail jumping is not a crime in Japan back then.
Yeah, but but you bring something up earlier, which is the biggest kicker of the whole thing. The Japanese do not like to be embarrassed, and they don't like their honor tested, and that's exactly how they viewed this whole situation, and they just wanted to get even.
Yeah, nobody likes to be humiliated or have their honor tested, so on and so forth. I get that because I'm an American patriot. I get it. But why bring false prosecution? That's an abuse of power. That's wrong on many levels. So that's what's troubling about that. Yeah, nobody wants to be humiliated or abused, so on and so forth. But you're going to abuse your power, abuse your prosecutorial power to wreck people's lives for long periods of time because of that. The answer is yeah. Japan does do that.
Yeah, it almost seems like the last 4 years that even our own judicial system has picked up a few of their tips in the areas of prosecuting people that have done nothing wrong. And for you, though, because when I watched the documentary, one of the thoughts that entered my mind was, did your military training help you while in solitary confinement?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. Um, Thankfully, my son has a lot of grit also. So I think grit has a lot to do with it. He was able to make it through. I remember him telling me one of the stories that he was reading the book, and it's so cold. You get frostbite every day there because you can't use a blanket to stay warm. He'd put one hand under his butt and hold the book with the other one reading. Once this hand got too cold, he would switch and go to this one and read. So that's one of the things you got to get through over there. You get frostbite on your hands and toes every day. And then at night, when you can use the blanket, what happens when you have frostbite and it starts to warm up and thaw out? It burns and it tingles badly. So you don't get much sleep. And the next morning, the same thing's going to happen again.
So
But
do you and
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah. A lot of it, I think, is you're born with grit. Some people have it, some people don't. I don't know if it can be created or generated. I think it can to some degree. But a lot of it is psychological. And you got to go through a psychological process in your own mind of how am I getting through this day? And I did that in what's called the segments in my mind. The first part, I've got to get up early before they blow the whistle or bang on doors because I want to have my blankets done and everything clean and neat beforehand. I don't want to be rushed. So I'll just wake up beforehand. That's a mental clock. Then your first order of the day is your meal. You're going to get a breakfast. Okay, I made it to breakfast. Got this piece of cake done. Yay, 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 yay. It's like doing a 30-mile rucksack march. I crossed the finish line. Now the next landmark is get to lunch. Once I got to lunch, all right, I'm jacked up for lunch, even though the lunch is garbage. And then the next time is getting to dinner time. And again, you're getting a cold plastic food and dinner time. But I made it there. All right, I'm jacked up. This is good. So these are little victories in your mind that you have to play. Now, the next thing is, okay, I get to use my blankets in a couple hours to go to sleep. That's going to be another victory. So, and then the following morning, I wake up again beforehand. That's another victory. And then same thing repeats itself. So you're going to make victories in those days of solitary confinement.
So they did allow you to read, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And I heard about
You're
and I
allowed.
don't want to give
You're
I
allowed.
don't want to give it all away, but I know that there was a whole situation with the paper tearing. which I've heard about before. So that really didn't surprise me. The biggest surprise to me was they did not allow you to exercise.
No, you're not allowed to exercise in your room at all. Yeah, they wouldn't allow that. You're allowed to have 3 books at a time. And that's one of the things they didn't count on real well because I had probably 30, 35 books hidden at one point. So, and I would just, every once in a while I have to turn them in because I couldn't send them to my son. He was in a different prison. Um, so I would just turn them in and just give them away. Okay, whatever. Or give them to my lawyers. They make me give them to the lawyers. They wouldn't handle it. That's what it was. But I would keep a couple books just so I could read it again because it was a good book. Like one was The Operator by Rob O'Neill. Great book. Great book. So I would hide that one somewhere amongst my goods. In case I got bored, I would pull it out and read it again. So I would do that once in a while. You're limited to 4 letters a month, 35 characters per line, 7 pages total, small paper. No phone calls ever. No phone calls ever. My father, I was told my father was dying. My Japanese lawyers came to visit me and told me my father was dying. Okay. There's no attorney-client privilege there either. When I'm talking to my 2 lawyers through the glass, I'm sitting here, there's a guard sitting next to me, an interpreter sitting next to the guard writing everything down that both parties say. And after that, a couple hours later, I get pulled into an investigative room, which I didn't realize was an investigative room by a deputy warden or some supervisor saying, did you have a visit with your lawyers today? So, well, if you don't know I had a visit with my lawyers today, it means they snuck in. He didn't like that. He said, yeah, we heard you had a visit with your lawyers. And, raising your voice is a violation of our rules here. I said, it's not relevant to me. He goes, well, we understand you raised your voice. I said, well, didn't raise my voice. There's 5 people in a room, and 4 of them will tell you I didn't raise my voice. And he said, well, who are the 4 people? I said, my 2 lawyers, me, and your guard. He goes, why my guard? I said, because your guard was sound asleep next to me. And if I raised my voice, he would have woke up. And if you doubt what I'm saying, check the videotape. The only one here that says I raised my voice was the only one looking for a promotion, and that's your interpreter. So
Wow.
that didn't go over very well either. But the bottom line is they wouldn't let me call my father before he died. How pathetic is that?
Yeah, for people that believe in honor and believe in family, but they take all that away for those that they incarcerate. And
Yeah,
I mean, what's the
I'm not
song?
sure they believe in family, do they?
I know that the family, I mean, in Japan, it's from what I've always learned that the family, everything is about honor
Yeah,
and
about honor, but
and the
I don't
respect,
know if they
hopefully the respect of the family. So I'm
I think
really,
they
some of the things
I
surprised
think they
me in the prison system.
I think they respect elders to a degree and
Yeah.
that have accomplished things like former prosecutors, so on and so forth. But I don't think their family ties are as close as ours, and they're definitely not as close as the Middle East. Even some of my attorneys over in Japan told me that. And they have a population that's decreasing every year. So that's another reason I'd question the family values.
That makes
It's the only,
sense.
it's the only population on Earth that's decreasing.
That's very, very interesting. Now, for being in solitary confinement, was it 24 hours a day?
Yeah, yeah. It's unlike in the United States because we were locked down when we were in the county jail waiting to be extradited, fighting the extradition. COVID had hit, and they put people in lockdown for 24 hours a day because of COVID. But you got 1 hour a day outside to exercise or walk around or do whatever. That's not Japan. Japan, you don't see outside. And it was so bad that I had to have vitamin D prescriptions when I got back. That's how bad it was, how white my skin was. And I'm not normally a white person, white person, fair skinned. And I had to have vitamin B12 injections. Total mess when you get back. Your body's just depleted.
Well, yeah, because see, that's with a lack of vitamin D. It's kind of like in the Scandinavian countries. They have a high suicide rate because of the lack of of sunshine and people getting outside, and that plays. It's very detrimental to mental health. And I'm sure that there were probably many people in the Japanese prison that wanted to end their life while they were there. I mean, even at Supermax in Colorado, solitary is 23 hours a day and you get 1 hour outside, but you're still connected to your
Not,
cell.
not Japan, not Japan. And if you have a white collar crime or you trespass or anything like that, you get treated as in your supermax in Colorado as if you were Zarnov, the Boston Marathon bomber.
Yeah,
Even the guys,
exactly.
even the guys in Guantanamo Bay get better treatment than people in Japanese prison.
My gosh, Michael. I mean, now one of the things that did surprise me in this documentary was the lack of empathy that Carlos Ghosn showed you. I found it shocking. But for you, did it just reveal who he really was?
No, I saw that and I heard it. Um, it has no real bearing on me. You know, we're all men, we're all big boys. You could say that we all knew the risks. Actually, I didn't know the risk of being extradited because I had bad information from some attorneys that said it wasn't an issue, and it wasn't. I shouldn't say that. That's not fair to say to the lawyers. Their information was correct. We didn't anticipate that they would be that embarrassed by it, and my name would be leaked, and they would go to that extent for revenge.
Yeah, revenge. I mean, for you and your son, once you got out of the Japanese prison, how long did it take you to, I guess, get used to freedom?
I still wake up every morning at 4 or 5, thinking I got to hurry downstairs because I don't know when this freedom's gone again. This is great. I can use the internet. I can turn the TV on. I can have a cup of tea, cup of coffee. I'm gonna walk around. I'm gonna open the damn door and walk out in the front lawn. This is pretty cool. I still do that today.
I guess millions of us take for granted our freedom, don't we?
Sure we do. Sure we do. And why not? Why shouldn't Americans take their freedom for granted?
Indeed. Indeed. Now, there's,
We're born in America. We hit the lottery.
yes, we did. We did. Now, there is a line in the documentary that I replayed a few times, so I'm going to let you explain it. You said that you are a great friend, even a great loyal friend, but I'm a great enemy too. Sound a bit like
Now,
revenge.
no, it's not revenge. It's just a statement of fact. Because I heard there were some people who questioned to that, and I just wanted to make sure it was clear that yeah, I'm a great friend, friend to a fault, even, and that's just how we grew up, especially in the military. You stand by your guys no matter what. But when it comes time to be enemies, oh, I'm a damn good enemy. I'll be your worst nightmare.
Now, do you still do security consulting?
If I've received some phone calls, if somebody's being held against their will, I'm all in.
I
Why
like
not?
that.
If somebody's being tortured, why not? I'm all in. Let's go make it happen.
Well, I want to end this on a very happy note. You are also an entrepreneur, so tell me about Vitamin One and what made you want to enter the healthy beverage sector.
Yeah, it actually happened in Iraq because we were drinking a lot of a very popular sports drinks over there, and the sports drink filled with each bottle 8.5 teaspoons of sugar. Horrible, horrible. And you drink 20 or 30 of those a day because the temperature is 120 to 140 degrees, and that sugar weighs you down, causes cramps and other problems. So we had to have some other drinks flown in for us, some Pedialyte, things with electrolytes, and it tastes horrible. Tastes horrible. Not knocking it or anything. It's great for children, but the taste was just difficult to overcome. That's where I got the idea of making a drink that's healthy, gives you energy without caffeine to mess up your sleep, and tastes good without the sugar. So I created a drink called Vitamin One. I actually have some right here.
Oh, that is awesome. How many flavors do you
Yeah,
have?
I got four flavors. This one, the passion berry, have mango, peach, and lemon lime. And in the US, you can get it on Amazon, and it's starting to get to more stores. But what's healthy about it is there's no sugar in it, there's all natural flavor, there's electrolytes, as well as the vitamins, all the B vitamins. And the B vitamins are important because they do enhance your energy, but it's not like caffeine in those energy drinks where you're drinking so much it messes up your sleep. So, yeah.
Oh, exactly. I mean, my doctorate's in nutrition, and I know that the B vitamins are excellent for the nervous system, great for the brain, helps to convert our proteins, our carbohydrates, and fats into energy. And I'm going to have to go on Amazon, and I'm going to have to order some of the vitamin one and try it myself because I'm like you. I don't want a drink loaded up with a bunch of sugar. I want it to benefit
Yeah.
my body and to feel great without having to lean on a cup of coffee. So that's fantastic. So for right now, Michael, what is life like for you?
Life is great. I'm not in solitary confinement. Nobody's shooting at me. I'm not shooting at anybody. Come on, what's better than that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And oh, ladies and gentlemen, I will say this. You know, we all watch the spy dramas on Netflix and Prime and other streaming services. And I'm sure you've wondered if some of the elements of the Expendables or Jack Ryan or Mission Impossible or even the current one out, The Lioness, are real. And I can assure you that some of those things you see have happened. There is a world of elite military personnel in the public sector who are working to keep America safe just as much as our men and women in our armed forces. And the life that Michael Taylor has lived is far more intense than any situation James Bond has ever been in. So if you want to see a small part of Michael's life, go watch on Apple TV Plus Wanted, The Escape of Carlos Ghosn, a 4-part documentary series, and you'll see what I mean. Now, I salute men like Michael Taylor. And Michael, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and much respect to you.
Thank you, my pleasure. I enjoyed time with you.
Thank you, Michael. And ladies and gentlemen, well, I want to thank you for watching and listening. And again, check out on Apple TV Plus Wanted, The Escape of Carlos Ghosn, and you'll see exactly what we've been talking about today. And as for me, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.